Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a completely fascinating and honestly pretty dramatic deep dive into one of the highest stakes arenas in the entire financial world. We're talking about the pharmaceutical buyout. We're going to look at the exact anatomy of a recent massive deal just to understand exactly how value is built, proven, and ultimately sold in the biotech industry. All right, let's just dive right into this. Take a look at this number, $2.65 billion. I mean, wow. That is the staggering amount that the French pharmaceutical company Servier recently agreed to pay to acquire a company called Edgewise Therapeutics. It's an absolutely massive payout. But, here's the catch. Why did Servier just spend billions of dollars on a company with literally zero approved products? Yeah, you heard that right. Edgewise Therapeutics doesn't have a single drug on the market right now. Zero commercial revenue. So how on earth does a company with absolutely nothing to sell command a multi-billion-dollar valuation? Well, to answer that, we really have to look past current revenues and focus entirely on future potential. Here is the anatomy of a biotech buyout. We're going to break down step by step exactly how Edgewise built the clinical, pipeline, and financial leverage needed to command this kind of massive premium. Step 1. Fighting rare muscle diseases. Any biotech success story really starts by targeting a critical unmet medical need. And for Edgewise, their primary battleground is Becker muscular dystrophy. It's a rare, genetic, life-shortening, and frankly debilitating neuromuscular disease. It causes progressive, contraction-induced muscle damage. And perhaps the most crucial part of this definition, both from a medical and a market standpoint, is that there are currently zero FDA-approved therapies for it. None. To truly understand the stakes here, we have to translate the clinical data into real-world realities. In these trials, doctors use a scoring system called the NSAA to measure patient mobility. For folks living with Becker, a mere 1-point decline on this scale is completely life-altering. We're talking about a loss of function that looks like going from using stairs normally to suddenly needing a cane, going from using the toilet independently to having to ask for help, or going from being able to get up from a fall on your own to requiring someone else's assistance. Preserving even a single point on this scale literally means preserving a person's independence. Step 2. Sevasemtin's clinical breakthrough. So Edgewise developed this drug candidate called sevasemtin. It's an oral treatment intended to protect dystrophic muscle from damage. Now, if you want a billion-dollar buyout, you need hard proof that your drug actually works. And data from their ARCH Phase 1 study provided exactly that. The trajectory for these patients based on their baseline characteristics usually shows a steep decline of -4.4 points over 3 years. But for the patients treated with sevasemtin over those exact same 36 months, instead of a steep drop-off, we see sustained stability. In fact, they actually achieved a slight positive score of +0.2. So, the absolutely crucial takeaway is this number right here, +4.6. That's the mean change difference versus the predicted decline. In the world of rare muscle diseases, halting that predicted decline and securing a 4.6-point advantage over 3 years, that is monumental. It preserves that critical independence we just talked about, and make no mistake, this specific piece of statistical proof is exactly what drove that multi-billion-dollar valuation. Okay, step 3, the cardiovascular pipeline. Here's the thing. A smart pharmaceutical giant doesn't usually drop billions of dollars on a one-trick pony, right? They want a foundational platform. And Edgewise wasn't just working on muscular dystrophy. They were actually rapidly advancing a broader cardiovascular portfolio. With EDG 7500 currently in Phase 2 trials for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and EDG 15400 in Phase 1 trials for heart failure, Servier isn't just buying one potential drug. They're acquiring an entire pipeline of novel therapeutics targeting really serious cardiac conditions. This essentially multiplies their potential future revenue streams. Moving on to step 4, financials and analyst forecasts. Understanding a biotech buyout really requires wrapping your head around the incredibly unique financial reality of a pre-revenue company. I like to call this the biotech paradox. Just think about the current reality for a second. In the first quarter of 2026 alone, Edgewise posted a net loss of $49 million. Their forecast return on equity is a pretty dismal -24.9%. Earnings per share, entirely negative. By traditional business metrics, it looks like a total disaster. But then look at the market optimism. Wall Street analysts actually give them an average price target of $47 a share, projecting massive upside. Why? Well, because in biotech, you aren't valued on current profits. You're valued on your cash runway and the strength of your clinical data. And speaking of cash runway, That is exactly what gave Edgewise immense negotiating leverage. They were sitting on a massive war chest of roughly $563 million in cash and marketable securities with zero debt, none. This meant they had the runway to fund their operations all the way through 2028. And here's the golden rule. When you don't actually need to sell your company just to keep the lights on, you force potential buyers to pay a huge premium to get your attention. Which brings us to step 5, the blockbuster severe acquisition. So the clinical breakthrough, the diverse pipeline, and that bulletproof balance sheet, it all culminated in a blockbuster payday. Here's exactly how that $2.65 billion breaks down. Servier is putting $1.55 billion down in cold, hard, upfront cash. But notice that last point there. Up to $1.1 billion is actually locked behind milestone payments, all tied to regulatory and commercial success. This is exactly how the buyer mitigates the risk. They're basically saying, hey, we believe in your data enough to give you $1.5 billion right now, but you have to actually get that FDA approval and hit your sales targets to see the rest of the money. Because as we always have to remember, biotech is basically a high-wire act without a net. As Edgewise themselves noted in their own SEC filings, actual results can differ materially due to the simple fact that these products are still in development and they aren't approved yet. A clinical trial could fail tomorrow, the FDA could suddenly demand more data. Until that drug is literally in a patient's hands, the risk is just immense. Which really leaves us with this final question to ponder. We've seen the devastating human cost of this disease, and we've also seen the incredible promise of the clinical data. Servier looked at those exact same facts and decided the gamble was worth $2.65 billion. So, in the high-stakes world of biotech, where massive fortunes are made and lost on a single clinical trial result, do you think the potential to cure the incurable is worth the risk of the clinical unknown? Let that sink in for a bit. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.